Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker, licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. With you once again, offering up all things real estate that apply to us here in the wide, wonderful county of Santa Clara. I serve Southern Silicon Valley, so the area from about San Jose down to Gilroy. As I said, I'm a licensed real estate broker. If you'd like some help buying or selling or investing in real estate, feel free to reach out to me. You can find me at soldbyrobert.com. But today we're going to spend some little bit of time talking about some of the latest news, and it's a familiar story where the headlines often leave someone with an impression that probably isn't as close to accurate as it could be, but we're going to cover that real quick. We're also going to talk about mortgage rates at the end here because I think they kind of tie in to the overall conversation. Before we get too far into things, though, I would also like to take a minute, and I know we tend to just talk real estate, but every once in a while we like to get into bigger things, and I know it's been a while since I've done a show on sort of lifestyle things, but I had a mentor in the 90s, and this wasn't even a mentor relating to real estate. This was actually a completely different thing, but there were lessons to be learned from this guy that went so much beyond just learning a specific skill, but how you approach things and how you interact with other people and how you manage situations where a lot of bad, dumb, or ill-conceived things are happening, and how you deal with those things in a way that gets as close to a positive outcome as possible, and doing it with just humor and kindness and all the things that you would want someone, if you were creating a list of how you would want someone to be. That was this guy. That was Gary, and I'm not going to share his last name. I don't have permission from his family to share his last name, but Gary passed away a little over a week ago from colon cancer. And when someone you consider to be a huge mentor passes, this is the first time I've had this really happen, and I think I'm bringing it up because for those of you out there that either maybe you're so young you really haven't hit parts of your life where you start to encounter people that can be really amazing mentors to you, or maybe there are people in your life right now that are mentors and you don't even really realize it. Take a moment to appreciate those folks in your life that are showing you a better way to do things. There are so many great examples out there, the dominant examples that are really bad, that are not good examples to emulate and move forward. And we touch on those here, in terms of the philosophies that I try to share here on the show. And I know I have an awful lot of real estate agents out there who listen to the show because I get an awful lot of feedback from you. And some of you really have a problem with what I say, and some of what I have to say doesn't come from a real estate thing. It comes from a trying to be a good person thing. And Gary was a huge part of helping me become the adult that I became, and helping me not only be able to acknowledge bad things, but then to deal with them in a far more productive way. So Godspeed to you, Gary. The world is worse off for you not being with us any longer, but those of us who have known you are so much better off for having had you in our lives. So if anyone wants to just, I realize you don't know him, but take a quick moment to just thank the universe for allowing people like Gary to grace us with their presence for some period of time. And I'm just thankful for the time that we did have. So it's far more a celebration of a life rather than anything else. But I just thought I'd share that because I thought it informed other things, not just my specific Gary, but your Gary. Who's the Gary in your life that maybe you want to take a minute to appreciate? Okay. Let's go ahead and jump in. There's some interesting numbers, and as usual, there's an awful lot of oddities in the way the information gets shared. And as I always warn you, whenever you're consulting with a news source or you are looking into something, always understand the built-in interests of the organization, right? It is always in the best interests of real estate focused businesses that lots of real estate happens, right? If you happen to be the National Association of Realtors or the California Association of Realtors, the way you make more money is by having more agents. And the way you have more agents is by saying good things about what's happening in the real estate market so that more people will get their real estate license and pay you realtor dues on a regular basis. So always keep that in mind. I realize that's a little bit jaded, but there's a reality element to this. The first thing I always look at when I'm looking at news stories is, what part does money play in this, and then what part does power play in this? And this is something I think you can use anywhere. It's not just a real estate thing. I think it's an across the board thing. But this is a headline from Realtor.com that's actually from MarketWatch, and I like MarketWatch. MarketWatch is actually a pretty good organization. I get really good data from them, and we're going to consult MarketWatch later. So in terms of interest rates, the headline is U.S. new home sales rise by 7.2% despite weakness in the broader sector. So it's tempered a little bit by mentioning broader weakness. But if you were to say that 7.2%, you might think, wow, that's a good thing. But as we look more into it, new home sales rose 7.2%, seasonally adjusted rate of 670,000 in January, up from the revised 625% in the prior month. So they're doing this month to month, and we've talked about month to month numbers before. In every market analysis that I do, I talk about understanding the difference between a month to month change versus a year over year change. And the year over year change is far more relevant for gauging the health of a market. That transition from one month to a number by itself is really not useful. When it's useful is when you're looking at, say, the last 6 months or a year, and then trying to decipher trends, overall trends, broader trends that transcend times of year, right? But at least they do mention the fact that this is a thing. A couple of paragraphs down, well, their paragraphs are very short. A few sentences down, year over year new home sales were still down by 19.4%. So nationally, year over year new home sales were down by 19.4%, and I believe they're talking about new homes, like new construction. And it's also important to note that new home sales is actually probably the more robust side of the market right now, simply because there's more of it. But if we look at the market overall, the total home sales in Santa Clara County compared to the same time last year were down 45% in January. So while it's 19.4% nationally, it's 45% for us locally. So our market, our local market here in Santa Clara County is far more hit than many other parts of the country. So that's one important thing to take away from this data. The other little tidbit here is the South led the U.S. in the number of new homes sold with the figure surging by 17.1%. So regionally, we're being challenged. But even if you look at what they focus in on as the hardest hit region, so sales of new homes dropped across the rest of the country, most sharply in the Northeast. So not even us, we're not in the Northeast, by 19.4%. So even in terms of regional, and I realize real estate's local, right? So when you want to talk about regions, I guess it's good to try to get an overall regional average. But even in California, or even just in Northern California or different neighborhoods in San Jose, the number of homes sold is going to fluctuate. But here at Santa Clara County, as I said, it's down 45%. So that's a significant drop. But it's also important to note that all of the other cities that we tend to cover as a group in the coffee and real estate session we do once every month, which you can check that out. It's still up on Facebook Live. I don't delete them after they're done, but that's a live event where you can bring your questions and comments. And you can find that at Facebook Live. Head on over there. There will be a link in the description of this video if you would like to go check that out. Whether you're watching the podcast or the video, it'll be available there for you. In San Jose, that number was 50%. So 50% fewer homes were sold. In Morgan Hill, it was 69%, and in Gilroy, it was 30%. Fewer homes sold. So across the board, fewer homes sold. So in every single community that we tend to focus on as the southern part of Silicon Valley, we are blowing out of the water all these worst performing regions, including the Northeast. In terms of big picture feedback in this story, home builders are offering incentives. And I thought this was super interesting because it may spell an opportunity for home buyers. As you know, we've talked about this before. Historically, you are paying a premium for a newer home. If we were looking at what prices were when things were nuts, even though you were paying tons of money for existing homes, you were still paying more for new homes. The premium on them was 15 to 20% in many cases. What you may find is that's no longer the case. you may find you can get yourself that 3-bedroom, 2-bath brand new home for an amount on par with buying that existing 3-bedroom, 2-bath home with a similar square footage and amenities. But after, with it being more or less equal, if you count incentives and mortgage rate buy downs. So make sure you're doing that math. So one of the big tidbits for my buyers out there in the world, if you have been disappointed in the past relating to your search for a home, and you haven't looked at new home sales because the prices were so insane and it seemed like such a huge obstacle to get over in terms of dealing with buying a brand new home, I'm going to suggest you start doing that now. Then that's a change in terms of the advice I've been giving, but the market's changed, and I think that with this being the truth, you need to check and see what kind of great deal you might be able to get. Because remember, for you buyers, it's not just the price you pay, it's also the terms and conditions, right? This represents a change to terms and conditions relating to your mortgage. So make sure to check that out. Feel free to go in there and work out the numbers with someone in a new home development and see if it ends up mathematically working out for you to being an actually better deal than if you were to simply buy a conventional loan financed home that was an existing home. If you are working with a real estate agent, tell the builder that you're working with a real estate agent. There's normally a cooperative relationship that they will have with agents that have clients. Just as a courtesy to your agent, I'd suggest that you let them know. And your agent should still be involved as an advisor to you during this process. The reason why I mention this is because the home builder will usually give some sort of a commission to the real estate agent. But in my world, I've done this several times. I still remain involved. I will still tour the property. If I see things that are concerning to me, I have asked that we get an inspection done. And I have caught things in an inspection relating to new construction. So don't assume everything's going to be completely 100% wonderful with new construction. That's not always the case. And we've had plenty of examples right here in San Jose of brand new construction where there was flooding issues and all kinds of things relating. Now, the good news is, even if you do end up buying a brand new home that has these problems, they're normally going to come up within that first year or two. And the warranty on new construction usually covers all of that stuff. And make sure that's something that you discuss with the folks that you're buying this brand new home from. All right, next on the hit list was high housing costs, low supply, hamper market recovery in January. Now, this is from Forbes. And where did we go? Here we go. Mortgage rates crept back up this month, which is prompting more buyers and sellers to back off. Home purchase applications dropped to the lowest level since 1995 last week. I don't know why I highlighted this paragraph before. I don't know why it went away. Home purchase applications dropped to the lowest level since 1995 last week as mortgage rates jumped on expectations that the Federal Reserve will need to raise interest rates again to combat inflation. The average 30-year fixed mortgage rate is now 6.5%, up from an average of 6.27 in January and 3.89 a year ago. That has caused the typical home buyer's monthly payment to rise more than $500 year over year. And just to calibrate you, we're going to look at some numbers in a minute that show the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate is higher than what they're talking about here. So unfortunately, I think those numbers still play into it. What's interesting about this is this discussion about Federal Reserve and raising rates as if that's a mystery. The Federal Reserve let us know they were going to continue to raise rates all through the year. The only thing they said, they would reduce it at a less of an accelerated rate. So last year we were seeing 50 basis point increases, which is basically 0.5%. And what we've been seeing more recently is 25 basis points, which is 0.25% increase. So yes, the way these interest rates get psychologically digested is just absolutely bizarre to me, and completely is one of those roller coaster rides. Because as we've discovered, right, even though the prime lending rate has been continually going up for the last year, right, all last year it was 0.5%. This year it's 0.25 and likely to continue to be 0.25% till the end of the year, because we need to get control of inflation before we can tackle recession. And remember, I know I say this every time, but you raise interest rates to fight inflation and you lower interest rates to fight recession. So we are not at the sweet spot yet where we've beaten inflation. So then that's the closest problem. So they want to take care of that one first. But notice how we've been continually increasing interest rates, the prime lending rate, and yet we have still seen fluctuations in mortgage rates, which just is another little bit of data for you to understand that so much of this has nothing to do with what happens with the prime rate. Now, of course, it's a corollary. It's one of the many elements. 10-year treasuries are actually the biggest influencer, but so much of this is psychological in terms of expectations. And anyone who didn't know that prime rates are expected to continue to increase at a 0.25% rate every time they get an opportunity to do it just simply hasn't been paying attention. So I guess there's that. It's not a comfort, but there it is. Okay, closed home sales fell 1.4% from the month earlier in January and slumped a record 36.6% from the year earlier. So this is overall. This sounds like not just new homes, but overall. And that clearly is still lower than the 45% we see in Santa Clara County. Let's see. The company Redfin noted that the year-over-year decline in closed sales had eased slightly, but that didn't continue into the new year. The large drop in closed sales is partly due to the fact that many of the home purchases that closed in January went under contract in the fall when mortgage rates hit a 20-year high. So that's another thing we've talked about, right? Where closed home sales data is actually typically a month old because the contract is accepted the month before because it takes 30 to 45 days for escrow to close. And then finally, I wanted to just hit where are interest rates right now. This is the national average. And you can see that they're at 6.88. Mortgage News Daily shows 6.88. If you were to go to these sites and you're right here locally in Morgan Hill and you were to enter your data and enter an average price, which is about $1.3 million, what you would find is that interest rates are around 6.5, 6.6, up to 6.8% if you have great credit, if you have excellent credit. So that's interesting to note. Another thing I thought I'd throw out there, we're focusing on 30-year fixed right now, but if we were to go ahead and look at the max, historically, we still have very low interest rates. Granted, for those of you who've been involved since the downturn, you younger folks, this is where we've been hovering, and now we're really just back to where we were in the early 2000s. But here's where I got into real estate back in 1988, and I know I've told the story where as soon as interest rates got below 10%, everyone completely went nuts, and I can literally remember the week that it happened. But so here we are in 87. Let's see, right there. So in 1990, right around there, 1990, 1989, late 89, whenever it was. But that's when it sort of broke between 10% to 9% and every house sold. So I thought I'd share that with you so you could get a little historical perspective on interest rates, but then also see where we're going, where things really have, at least for folks who have gotten calibrated to what interest rates are supposed to be just over the last decade. Going back to about 2002. So if your experience doesn't extend any far back than that, then obviously this is a shocking interest rate for you. But you know, this historically going way back, this isn't a big deal. Obviously, more recent history it is. So, all right, folks. I hope we have provided you with some useful data. As always, the goal is to leave you with more knowledge on the table than we take up in your time. Absolutely hope we've achieved that this time around. Thanks again for listening. I'll talk to y'all next time.